Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our next webinar, which is going to be starting in just a few minutes' time. So while everybody gets settled, we'll just talk you through the topic, which is going to be 10 time-saving shortcuts on Voly. Those of you that have joined these webinars before will be more than familiar with our faces, but just to remind you, my name's Joe and I work in our implementation team. So I look at onboarding our new clients and getting them all onboarded with our software before handing them over to a dedicated client relationship manager who then manages their account going forward. And I'm here today with Georgia.
Hi, so I'm Georgia. I'm one of the client trainers here at Voly. So some of you will have trained before or at least been on a call with. So for me, it's more about making sure that you're all ready to start using the system after your initial onboarding and things like that. So very well versed in the platform on today's topics.
Absolutely. And just as a quick reminder, please do feel free to pop any questions you might have in our chat, and we will take the time to answer them at the end. As always, anything that is specific to your vessel or your account will always pick up with you privately in either a call or an email afterwards. But anything you'd like to ask, please do pop it in and we'll always answer at the end. Perfect. Well, Georgia, do you think it's time for us to perhaps get started?
Yeah, but it looks like we've got a good number of people in now, so get going.
Perfect. So let me just quickly pull up our demo account here. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk you through relates to our approval flow. Now, this might be something that's fairly familiar or very familiar even for most of our existing clients, but part of my role as the implementation manager is to talk through clients' approval workflows in our intro call. So that's the call we do with all of our new clients to understand what their requirements are and how they'll be using the platform. And often we're told almost horror stories of how approvals are done before clients join Voly. You'd be amazed how many times we hear stories about very onerous email chains with several people in. We've even got stories of WhatsApp groups, for example, being used, and you'll have hundreds of thousands of pounds of expenditure approved with a thumbs up from somebody in a WhatsApp group. And one of the best parts of Voly is how that can all be integrated into our approvals flow. Let's just quickly recap where that takes place. So when a transaction, whatever type of transaction that might be, is added that requires further approval, it will then sit in our approvals tab, and that's where it will sit until it's got all the approval it needs. So that means it won't actually hit the purchase ledger and appear in any reports until it has all that approval. Let's just quickly recap what that looks like, and it's in here. So the transactions which are currently at the stage of requiring my approval in the chain, let's say I'm a captain, it's already been approved by head of department, it's come to me awaiting my approval, and then once I've approved it, it would then potentially go on to management for approval, at which point it would be sat here awaiting approval by others or whoever that might be. Now, whilst that's familiar for most of our existing clients, I'd like to just talk you through a couple of things which might save you some time that you're not aware of. The first one is that whilst our standard and default approval workflow is head of department up to captain and then up to administrator if needed, we've got a fairly new feature, which is our purser role. And that means we can essentially insert the purser into that approval chain for you. So once the head of department has approved the invoice, it can actually go to purser before it goes on to captain. Now, that's advantageous for a number of reasons, but the main reason our clients love it is because it means that the purser is pre-screening those invoices, which means that captain has to reject fewer invoices which aren't totally correct. Now, that's something that we can do for you. It's a bespoke setting. So if you do have a slightly larger vessel and you're thinking that this would be useful to have the purser with those permissions, just give us a message either in this in the chat on our Zoom call or a live chat on the website, and we'll happily arrange that with your relationship manager. Now, the second thing that some of our clients aren't aware of is that you can actually be notified by email every time there's an approval that you need to act on. And to do that, what you need to do is go into the settings cogs in the top right corner and then find the notifications area. Now, there are lots of notifications because, as you know, our system is bespoke to your requirements and it is permissions based. So if you really want to, you can very quickly enable all email notifications to do with approvals in one click by enabling them there. But if you don't want all of them, there might be some which are more important for you. One that I'd really like to draw your attention to is this one. a purchase invoice has been created which requires my approval, because that is an invoice has been added and it's now up to me in the approval chain. Let's say that I'm the captain or the purser if I've enabled the purser role. Now I don't have to come onto Voly as much because I can actually get emailed at the right moment and then log in just to do that. One thing that might be even easier for you though is to use it's not a brand new mobile app. We keep calling it the new app, but it has been around for a little while now. Let me show you how you can actually use our approvals flow within the app. So you don't even need to log onto the desktop to do your approvals if you are in that at that level in the approval chain. When you're in the home page of the app, you'll see that just underneath Add Transaction, you've got the Approvals button there. When you click into there, as you can see in the screenshot on the right, you've got all the things requiring approval. When you click into one of them, you'll get all of the details. You can scroll through that and check them all. And at the bottom right here, where it has the image symbol, that's where you'd actually be able to go in and check that transaction file. And then obviously you've got the two buttons for approve and reject at the bottom. And inevitably, you'd have to add a quick comment for your approval, minimum 3 characters, and then you can approve it from there. So even if you are already, and we hope that you are, making use of our approvals flow, have you considered adding the purser in there or enabling email notifications or even using our mobile app to approve? Hopefully that will save you a little bit of time. Now, related to that, I'm going to hand you over to Georgia to talk about comments.
Thank you very much, Joe. So yes, so on the system then, if you've been using the system for any length of time, you'll notice on the home page here, when you've logged on, you'll have comments for the vessel account that you're sat within. So these comments can be system driven. They might be a manually input comment. And then what you're able to do is actually tag each other to the comments on there. So let's say then you're maybe a purser on the vessel and you've gone and taken a look at a transaction. It doesn't need approval, so it's not following the approval flow, but you would like, management or captain to take a look at that specific transaction. What would happen then is will you be able to go and find that transaction? So let me come to my invoices page here. And then once you're in the area next to any transaction, whether you be on an invoice, whether you be in a bank account, you'll be able to see here, you've got your comment box just there. So if you click into that comment box, you can then tag a user to that transaction by using the @ symbol and then typing their name on that one. So if I start typing Anne on that one, we can see she's got access to this account. So we can tag her to it and then add in the rest of our comments. So if I put on here, please review, because they need to have a look over it and I'm not too sure whether that's right to go. And then when I add that comment, what's really good about the system is if the notification is enabled for that mention, then the person who's receiving the mention will then receive an email letting them know that they have been mentioned in a comment. So then if we come over here onto the settings, as Joe did for the approval one, and then we come down to our notifications here at the bottom, the very bottom notification in this section is mentions of me in a comment. So if I toggle that then to yes, I'm then going to receive an email each time someone tags me to a comment without having to see all comments. Now, one extra thing to note about the notifications is they are vessel specific. So if you are going on and you're a manager for multiple vessels, but you only need to be notified over mentions in certain accounts because you'll never get information from the other ones, they're not something you manage, then you can come and make them bespoke. So you might want to get notified for this one and another one, but not the third one. And that's absolutely fine on the system. If you don't want to have the notifications enabled, it's fine. You'll still be able to see your comments you've been mentioned in. So if we go back to the home page and back to that comments section, you'll be able to see here that you've got a few filter options. So the first thing is, of course, you can say whether you want to only see unread ones. And then we've also got the mentions of me on there. So unfortunately, I don't have any tag to me. I'm not very popular on my account, but you'll be able to then see it here as any other comment. And you'll also be able to then click into it to see the comment that you've been tagged to. So for example, if I come into this one here, it's then going to take me to the source of that comment where I can then see the comment trail, add my own, add more to it as well on that one. Comments, of course, stay locked and attached to a transaction. So in terms of how they work and that, they'll be there forever. So even if you're making the comment at one stage of an approval process, even once then an invoice is fully approved, it will still stay as part of that with a date and time stamp and name stamp on there. So it can just replace things like emails, WhatsApps, especially like Joe mentioned before, if there is a case where you're in, one group and there's lots of back and forth and you're trying to find which transaction you should be looking at, the system then ties it all together really nicely and easily for you on there to save you a bit of time. Over to Joe now for the next top time saving tip.
Thanks, Georgia. So hopefully you can all see my screen again. So what I'm going to talk you through now is a little bit of a specific case, but it's something that I think our clients will find really useful. And that's how can I best account for a shipyard period when we've got a shipyard paying invoices on our behalf? Because what some of our clients jump to is actually adding the shipyard as that supplier. But what that means is you lose part of your data because you can't actually record who the supplier is. Now, we have a solution for that, and I'm going to talk you through it now. But needless to say, if you do have any questions about it, just get in touch, because if you are going into the shipyard, there's a lot of other products and help we can provide you. But if we go into our banking page, you will notice that down the list, we've got our external bank accounts, so our non-Voly integrated accounts. Now, when you go into one, you'll see that there is a button to create a beneficiary, and you can follow our standard steps, selecting the country and inputting those details to actually add bank details to that external account. So let's go back into banking and see one I prepared earlier, that very well-known Stockport shipyard, just where we're based. Essentially, by adding the beneficiary details to this account, what I've done is I have enabled the possibility of sending funds directly from the integrated Voly Money account direct to the shipyard. But when I do that, not only do the funds actually land in the shipyard's external account with them, and they can confirm that receipt of funds, it also shows that money as entering this external account, which, if you like, means I have a constantly updating balance, which shows my balance with the shipyard. So if I then make another large payment, it would update. So how does this help you record things paid on your behalf? Well, what it means is if we have an invoice in our invoices tab, and let's navigate there across the navigation bar, let's scroll down to one that I'd already made, one I know is unpaid, this one here. When this invoice is ready for payment, but I know that the shipyard, Stockport shipyard, are going to pay this on my behalf, I just need to click on add payment. So I've added my invoice as normal, recorded as much or as little information as I'd like, and I can show that as paid from that Stockport shipyard. Now, when I do that, what that will do is it will then mean that the balance automatically updates. And then if we were to go back into that Stockport shipyard, we'd be able to see that the balance has updated for me. So as you can see, this has got the live money I've actually sent the shipyard. So at this moment in time, I had £10 of credit with them, if you like, and they have paid one invoice on my behalf. I've recorded it, and therefore that's the balance I have left. Really easy for me to keep a track of when they need to be sent additional funds if they're not requesting that proactively. But also when I then click in, it means that all that information can be there. I can look at the invoice number and click in to get all that information. So that's a really handy tip if you do have any situations. It doesn't just have to be a shipyard where you've got somebody else paying on your behalf and you're making bulk payments to them in advance. As I say, it might be a little bit specific and we are a little bit out of the shipyard period, so do get in touch nearer the time if you want to. Georgia is going to talk us through now how you can save time using our reports tab. Oh, Georgia, you're just muted at the moment. Sorry.
Sorry, that's my mistake.
No worries.
So yeah, on there then when you are on your reports page, one of my favorite reports is the transaction detail report. So it's been an ongoing joke with Joe that I do mention it every webinar, and that is because it's so versatile and works really well for multiple functions on there. So if we come into the reports area then and we select the transaction detail report from our drop down, as always, you've got your date type selection. So I want to see everything that was invoiced between my two dates here. So when I'm viewing this report now, oops, it would help if I had something on there. Bear with me 1 second. It's because I've done my account. It should be on there. Bear with me 1 second. Small technical issue on that one. Let me come back on there. Sorry, just bear with me 1 moment while I just take a look at this. Do you have any issues at all with your reports, please don't hesitate to let us know and we'll be able to take a look at that for you. It might just be because I have tried to preset it up. There we go. So we can see here, this is how it should work. You should be able to then see it nice and easily on there, where you're then able to see all transactions from all accounts. So we can see it, whether it was invoiced on our invoices page, whether it was a transaction we've now processed, it'll show everywhere on there. So if you are someone that's coming and reviewing transactions, so let's say you're a purser or a captain or an admin, and the crew are processing their own transactions, adding their own invoices, and at the end of the month, you want to make sure all the correct categories have been selected. So again, one of those things we often hear is, crew are often tempted to just select miscellaneous as the category option because they're not too sure where it should go. But let's say then you are the one that's reviewing that transaction. You can see easily in this transaction detail report the description and a category to save you having to go to the invoices page and then each card account and check it. It's all together on there. So what you can do then at this stage is you can click into that transaction, and then if you know, of course, which category is the one you would like it to be, you'll have, as long as you have the relevant permissions, this little quick edit button with the pencil and paper icon. And then if you select it and use your drop down, then of course you can then make changes to the correct one on there. So for example, engineering new items and save it. And then all you'd need to do is when you come back to this page here is then view the report to refresh it, and it should then show you your updated category like so. Another reason I really like this report is it has got its filter options as well. So if you are using some of our extra features on the platform, such as cost centers, additional fields and things like that to pull reports really quickly and easily, this is the report that's going to work for you in terms of seeing those expenses. So let's say, as Joe mentioned, we're coming out of the refit season now. We're going to come into my cost center and I want to see everything that was spent in the shipyard as against my shipyard 2025. When I then select it, it's showing me then my transactions and then a total for those at the end just there. So it's a really quick overview then to what's been spent if all the transactions have been tagged to that cost center. So it just gives it's a few different ways it works in terms of overview of transactions, the ability to then filter down things nice and easily on there, which can save times in multiple different ways. But there's limitless applications to this report. So if you do have any questions at all around it or what it can do for you, just let us know and we'll be able to help you out with that. Back to Joe.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Georgia. Now, what I'm going to share with you now relates to how you are able to save some time when you're paying things on Voly, so making those payments that are integrated with our Voly Money account. So those of you that aren't aware, in addition to the accounting software, we have integrated Voly Money accounts, which we can currently have in 3 currencies. That's euros, USD, and pound sterling, which means that when those invoices, like we discussed earlier, have received all that necessary approval, you can then pay them directly from your Voly Money accounts. Now, the question is, if you've got lots of invoices outstanding for one supplier, is there a quicker way than paying them all individually? And the answer is, of course. Let's look at how you can actually make a batch payment to a supplier. And there's 2 places that you can do this. Firstly, let's navigate towards our unpaid invoices. And initially, we need to start off in the invoices tab along the navigation bar, and then just go into accounts payable here on the right. When we get through into there, we'll click through into unpaid invoices, where all of my unpaid invoices are organized very handily by supplier. So when they all pull through, as we always say, this is our demo account that we've been using for a number of years. So there's several unpaid invoices. Let's filter it by the supplier I've already got ready here. Excuse me. And when we do that, we'll then have all of the unpaid invoices for my one supplier. And then as you'll see, I've got here really handily my batch pay button. And what that allows me to do then is if I click into there, it will bring me up to the creating the payment page. So if initially I select the bank account I'd like to pay it from, now I'm going to pay this from our Euro account, but given that it's a GBP invoice, my first port of call would be our in-house treasury team, because if I touch base with them, there's a very high chance that they'd be able to convert the funds I need for me and very likely get me a great rate with that. So I definitely recommend that. Then what I can do is I can select which invoices I'd like to pay by doing this. And the system will create one payment for me and tell me the cost in euro, that live quote. And if I click Save Payment, that payment, as you'll know already, will go straight through onto the approvals page, ready for execution or approving, depending on your workflow. Now, there is a second place that you are able to do this, and that's from your suppliers page, the suppliers page, which might be called contacts, depending on whether you report on your sales income or not. So if we go into there and we find the same supplier, which was called Crest, let's find that supplier. Here we go. And then you'll see just to the right there is the batch pay button. So that's another place that you're also able to do this really quickly. And if you click on there, it will take you straight through to that exact screen. So whichever way you'd like to do it, this is a really great way that lots of our clients love to pay their invoices, because it's just one that they execute. And then the system will automatically show all of those invoices as paid and update that for you. That is the beauty of using our integrated accounts. Obviously, if you're not currently using Voly Money Payments to settle your invoices, please do get in touch with your client relationship manager, because we'd love to talk how we can save you hours and hours every week and every month. We can end the need to do manual reconciliations for you, all of those painful hours spent comparing your bank statement to your external account on Voly. We can end that in one simple setting. So let me now hand over to Georgia to talk us through a different way you can invoice.
Absolutely. So one of the other ways on the system that you can save time on there is that you can invoice directly to asset and liability categories. So of course, if you're out there and you're purchasing an item such as, a large item such as tender, and you want that to show then as an asset in your balance sheet, then we can do that by using our journals functionality and have it showing here. Or if you would prefer to have it as a direct invoice to that asset category to save you having to potentially go through multiple steps to have it show in this report, that's something we can then enable for you on there. So if we take a look at my balance sheet here, I've got my tender showing as a asset, and that comes from an invoice that I submitted earlier on in the month. And then now what I want is I've got insurance for that tender, and I want that to show then as liabilities on the liabilities section of my balance sheet. So by default, as we know, the balance sheet is only going to show liabilities showing as accounts payable, payments and things in supplier prepayments as on that one. So what we need to do now is add a liability category for this. So what we would do is, if we haven't already got a liability category set up, is of course go to our settings here. And this is the same if you're doing it for an asset. You've got your asset categories and your liability categories just on there. And then let your client relationship manager or account manager know that you want to be able to invoice directly against these categories rather than having to go through the journal section. And then they'll enable that for you. So then when you come to add your invoice on the system, so for example on there, I'm going to put it's my tender insurance, and in my invoice number on that one. And then if I come in my category drop down here, I'm now able to see down at the bottom past my expense categories, I'll also see my asset categories as well as my liabilities categories. So we can see there I've got my asset and now my liabilities for that one. I'm just going to then input my amount on there. So let's say it was 3,000 for that one. And then when I save this invoice now, it's then going to go and sit on my invoices page waiting payment. But also if I come and rerun my report for that one, I'm also going to see now that category in my balance sheet and the value of it as well on there. So if we view the report, give it a minute just to run because it's got refreshed information on there. And then down at the bottom here, we can see in my liabilities section, I've now got tender insurance showing and the value of that one in the reporting currency of the account on there. So it's a quicker and easier way. Like I say, if you are working a lot with asset and liability categories and you are wanting to show invoices directly against those areas on the platform as well. So it is something that we would need to enable for you. So if it is something you're interested in, please do not hesitate to get in touch with your account manager or a member of the team, and we'll be able to do that for you. Over to Joe.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Georgia. So what I wanted to talk to you about now is just give me one moment. Let's see if that is easier. So what I wanted to talk to you about now was how you can use budgets on Voly. Now, We've talked about budgets before, but what I'd like to do is talk you through how you can actually import and export them very quickly. So for those of you who aren't using our budgets tab, let's recap why that's really beneficial. The first reason is if we navigate to the reports tab, it unlocks the budget to actual report for you. And if we just recap, I know we've mentioned it in previous webinars, the benefit there, if Georgia loves the transaction detail, I think I'd have to say I love the budget to actual report. Essentially, if you run that by obviously your selected budget, it then gives you all of your actual spend. So that's the sum total of all of the expenditure that's been logged and processed and approved, obviously, on the platform versus the amount you budgeted for each of those months. It gives you a variance there as a figure and also the percentage. So how do I go about getting my budget added into Volley? Well, if we navigate to the budgets tab, you'll then have the option to select the budget you'd like to load. So let's load up the October 2024 budget that we were looking at earlier. If we look in there, obviously the first thing I can do if I want to is click edit and edit the values there. However, if I've got an entire annual budget, how do I do that? Well, the first thing I'd suggest is once you have added all the budget months you'd like, so if you want to do this, obviously you can go through and add them. So let's say you're already going to start doing it for 2026, add those months in. And then what you can do is you can load them up and export the budget template. And then that will provide you with a file which looks just like this. And you'll essentially have all of the months along the top. So this was our 24-25 because we're reporting on that as the financial year here. And all of the categories down here. Now, all you need to do is enter the values in here and then it will actually change that for you. And then obviously you can then import it. So once you've updated that, if we go back into the budgets tab, what do? You just need to click on import budget. You select the file. If you'd like to lock your budget, which lots of our clients really appreciate, you enter your password and that way you won't then allow anybody other than yourself to edit that budget period. This is really useful because once you've imported that, obviously it means if you do have the budget prepared in a client-friendly format, you can then just really quickly copy the columns into our template and upload it. Obviously, we'll happily help you do that as well. The client relationship team will as well. Also, lots of our clients, more and more, I'd say, I'm sure Georgia would agree, are giving heads of departments the option to see the budget to actual so that they can kind of keep a track of their spend, which is really useful. So if you're not using budget, please do give it a go. And like we always say, get in touch if you have any issues whatsoever. Georgia now is going to talk us through how you can save time on the suppliers page.
Absolutely. So over on the suppliers page, then whether you have it still set to suppliers or you have it as contacts because you have accounts receivable switched on, either way, this function will be there for you. Coming to your page here, you'll then be able to see a list of your suppliers. To find your supplier nice and easily, you've of course got your filters function here at the top. And then within the supplier, it's one of those that some clients know about it, some don't. So I thought it'd be useful to go through is our supplier details. So some of you may go straight past this section when you're adding your beneficiary details to a supplier, but there's two ways to navigate to this. You can either click on the little icon just here, or if you want to go the long way, you can click into the supplier and then into your supplier details here at the top on that one. So again, this is where most people would then stop and go to the create beneficiary and not glance at this part again. But you do have the ability to save information here. So this can be used by captain and admin, and then it can be viewed by the crew. So let's say then you're using this admins for you as your supplier, but you have a specific contact at that supplier that you want the crew to get in contact with anytime they use them. So for example, very generic John Smith. You can also save in there things like a mobile number, phone number. You can set a preset a VAT rate as well that will then pull through to any transactions you're inputting the supplier for. And then one of the other sections is here are supplier terms. So as we know, when we add an invoice, it automatically allocates a due date of a month on from the invoice date. But let's say this supplier regularly needs their invoices paying within 2 weeks or within 2 months, and you want the system to automatically apply that to it. If we then put in here that my supplier terms is actually 14 days, what would happen now is when I go to my invoices page, I select admins for you as a supplier. It will then automatically populate the due date as 14 days from the invoice date on there rather than the standard 30 days. So it's just a small change that can make a big difference if there are being lots of invoices added against it, and saves everyone having to double check they have updated that due date, especially if you're a management company that works off the due date and pays them as close to that due date as possible. Also, here is where you'd be able to set up automatic emailing. So if you wanted to automatically have remittance advice for a payment sent, you input the email address for the person, and then you click to tap it onto there. And then that means next time remittance advice is then created for this supplier, it's then going to send it onto this person's email address. And that's the same for purchase orders as well. So the information stored in here, some of it is just storage of information, whereas other bits are actions within the system. So if that is something you specifically want to do or have a question around, as always, get in touch with us. One more thing I wanted to touch upon, though, in this supplier section is also down here, the ability to add comments. So we've talked a bit about comments previously, but specifically in the suppliers comments, we're hearing a lot more of where, beneficiary details have been added, but there needs to be a check in place beforehand. So somebody needs to ring that supplier and make sure they're the genuine details. Well, maybe you want to make sure on the system that it's logged that you did that step. So what you can do is when you create, before you create the beneficiary details or after at any stage, you can come and add a comment here, and it might just be that, today checked details on that one. So something really specific, or of course, if you have a different system and code that you want to use on there, you can do. And then what that's going to do is that's then going to save that comment for anyone who has access to the supplier comments to see. And also the ability to add supplier files. So again, if it's the first time you're using this supplier, you've got the beneficiary details straight off the invoice. Maybe then it's, a year or so on, you don't want to go back all the way through to find that first invoice to then check the details again. The person who's created the beneficiary details on the platform can always add a copy of those on there. The system will allow, as always, JPEG, PNG, and PDF format files no larger than 16 pages to that. But you can have multiple files, multiple comments attached to it as well. So it's a bit of not so much time saving in the initial, but will definitely save time going forward to save people asking who to contact, update due dates, make sure details are checked, having to ring around. It's just another place to store information related to that supplier to make everything easier going forward on that one. Over to Joe now.
Perfect. Just definitely that automatic remittance advice, I think, was the best feature for that when I was working in the client relations team. The clients I was dealing with absolutely loved that, because it just, like Georgia said, meant that it saves hours really over a month, because you no longer have to go in, download them, and then email them. And your suppliers know exactly when they've been paid. And again, not only does the invoice update to show it's paid, but the remittance advice is sent automatically. Last thing for me to show you then, let me share my screen. Now, as you will already be aware, let me just make sure that my screen is sharing correctly. Perfect. So when you are on the banking page or the invoices page and you want to go in and look at a transaction, so you go in and it will load up the bank account. It will default to 10 items per page at the bottom here. Now, this is a really quick and easy win. Some of the things our clients tell us is, well, I want it to load more than 10 at any given time. And that's something you can update in your settings. So if you go up to the highest level of Voly that you're on by clicking on the Voly logo, then go into settings and then go into my account, you'll see there that the default list show is automatically set to 10. Whereas now, if I turn that up to 50, for example, it will then load 50 on the page for me. The maximum you can do is 100. Obviously, the reason is if you've been using the platform for a number of years, if it said show all as an option, you might be loading thousands of invoices with all that data. We don't want you to be waiting those couple of extra seconds each time. So 100 is that maximum. That's a great way you can save time if you are regularly having to update that each time on the banking in the bank account or on the invoices page, for example. It's really useful to do that in advance. So whilst that is a quick one, I know it's something our clients ask a fair amount. So please do feel free to get that set up or ask us for some help with that. I'm going to hand back to Georgia one final time for the last time-saving tip for today.
I'll try and keep this as quick as possible because I am aware of we've been so busy giving you time-saving tips. We've not we've gone over a bit there. So apologies and thank you so much for staying with us for this one. So the next and last one relates to the request page. So if you are a client that's using requests, you can, as you're aware, have an approval process for that one if you have an approval flow in place. How it works by default is, of course, if there is a request submitted over the submitter's limit, it's then going to go through for approval. Now, how the system works is once that amount has then been approved, that's essentially the value that we're allowed up to for it not going through for reapproval. So then if a crew member then adds the invoice of that same value or less, by default, it will go through ready for payment on the system. Now, we already have on there the ability to have every invoice going through for approval before it can go through for payment. So maybe, although we've approved the request value, we want to make sure that, if there's any changes, we're aware of it and we can review that. But one that's maybe not so much talked about is our request tolerance feature on the system. So maybe it's not so much you want to review every invoice, maybe you want to, let some of them go through. But if it's over, over the amount by like a penny, you don't want to have to review that one. So that's where the request tolerance comes in. So we say then, how much would you like your request tolerance to be? And you can let us know. It's anything from 1 to 99% on there. So let's say it's 10% for argument's sake. It means then that anything up to 10% more than the approved request value would go through ready for payment as an invoice without going for reapproval. It also works in the below function as well. So not only then is it, well, if it's over by 10%, it's fine, and anything under is okay. So it means then there's a chances, if there's a case where somebody's input an invoice and they're saying it's for this request, but it's drastically lower. Maybe it's because it's a deposit amount that needs paying earlier. Maybe it's just because there's an error. That would then also be brought to your attention if it does fall below that hypothetical 10% on there. So like I say, request as a whole is a whole feature within itself that is really underutilized on the platform that can be really great for additional approval steps and approval flows. But specifically with that request tolerance, it can save you time if you are thinking, well, I don't want to reapprove it for, a delivery fee that's been forgotten, but I do want to approve it if, somebody's forgotten to add an item onto the order. So again, that was the last and final time-saving tip on the system. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. And again, apologies, we're slightly overrun there with that one. If now's the time to ask any questions, so if you want to put your questions in the chat, I'm just going to go through and see what we've got on there.
Perfect. While Georgia has a quick look there, just to draw your attention to our next webinar, which will be taking place in just over a month's time, which will actually be on a brand new feature, a really new one, and that's about how you can log and charge damages that take place during a charter to the guest's final APA report. And that's something that we're actually going to be integrating into the system using Pinpoint Works as well. So it will actually be Georgia and Alfie, who's just joined the Voly training team. So that'll be his webinar debut, so to speak. So please do sign up with that when you see the links go out on LinkedIn or by email or on the platform, because we'd love to explain this feature to you. It will save a lot of time for those unfortunate damages just in time for charter season when it arrives. But let me go back now to also help Georgia with any questions that there might be.
Okay, so the first question that we've received is, are fleet-wide notifications a possibility or something to be added in the future? So at the moment, there's not anything in the pipeline in terms of planning for those ones. At the minute, it is just a asset by asset level, because of course, in case you are just an account manager that's managing a set number of boats out of a whole fleet of them. But of course, if it is something that is required and wanted by clients, if the demand's there for it, then it is something we can suggest to our product team for bringing something in the future onto the platform. So yes, we'll definitely feed that back on if that is something you guys would like to see coming on the system. We've just got a question there about, will you go over the calculator feature? It is one of our newer features, as you might be aware if you joined any of the webinars last year. We mentioned it a couple of times. So I can see the issue there in terms of subtracting numbers. It can be a bit tricky because when you click the minus button, it automatically creates it to be a minus number. The easiest way to fix that is to do your minus first and then add the positive number, which is not ideal. So I am going to go and speak to our product team as well after this, and we'll come back to you as well, that client who's mentioned it, and we'll see if there's an easier way to do it. If it is, maybe, because I just had a very quick look while the webinar was ongoing, it might just be me having a user error, and there might be a nicer way to do it on there. So we'll get that checked out and come back to you on that one for there.
You can also see in our question and answer area that we've got a question about the different date formats, which I suspect obviously is linked to the issue of being based in the United States. Now, let me pick that up separately to this call, because we want to make sure that that's working for everybody. I do think I was aware of this specific case, and I hope that that's been communicated. So we will reach out about that one to make sure that you're able to upload those budgets. And I can see it also another thing about that supplier terms and being essentially same day due date. So I think it might be worthwhile us to reach out and discuss that separately, because it might be useful for you. And then last but not least, I can also see that there's somebody out there that loves the transaction detail as much as Georgia. So thank you very much for that feedback there.
I think we should definitely have a poll on what's the favourite report. If we do a reports-based webinar, we should send out a poll, and we can have our audience favourites then.
Absolutely. Well, given that we've slightly overrun, we will leave it there for today. Thank you all so much for joining. As I say, we'll pick up those couple of things privately after this call. And please do join us for the next webinar, not with me, but with my colleagues in about a month's time. Perfect.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much. See you all later. Bye.
Bye.